So as thousands of anti-government protesters are feared dead in Iran, the U.S. is sending military assets, including an aircraft carrier, the USS Abraham Lincoln, to the Middle East.
Fox News confirming at least one aircraft carrier is en route to the Middle East, with other military assets from air, land, and sea expected to begin flowing into the region in the coming days and weeks.
Yesterday, 2 aircraft carriers left San Diego and Norfolk. It's not clear whether they have orders to proceed.
Regimes don't die overnight, but this is a dying regime.
Clearly, the president has made a statement, his credibility is on the line, and listen, when he gives his word, he executes. And that is simply to hold the people that are accountable for what they have done to their own citizens in killing them.
So this is the beginning of the end.
There are economic and cyber options at the president's disposal, including accelerating the collapse of the banking system, Mike. That is keeping the regime and the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, and security forces funded right now. Mike.
We are likely conducting information operations against the oppressors, the middle-level leaders of the oppressors, the people also carrying the guns. Because if and when, and I believe it's when, kinetic operations are conducted against that organization, against its leaders, we want divisiveness in it. We want that organization to break apart. We want some of them to go over to the side of the protesters, because the reality is the regime is more in trouble as a result of kinetic operations.
The United States is extremely well positioned, and I have every confidence the president is going to take action and make the best decision. However, what's made of that strike is up to the Iranian people.
Welcome to Boney's View. My name is Chisom, and this is Chisom's Insight, Episode 6, where we follow the evidence, not the noise, no fluff, no spin, just the facts. Or, as a friend likes to say, this is straight knowledge served hot. This episode is titled, The Realistic Expectation If Military Strikes Happen. And this is a direct sequel to Episode 5, where we broke down the U.S. military buildup and why posture and timing matter. Now, the real question. What does a strike do to the balance of power in Tehran? Does it strengthen the regime's narrative, collapse it instantly, or widen the weakness that's already been exposed by the protests? And if something shifts, what shifts first? Is it the streets? The security forces? The inner circle? And could pressure reach a point where some officials start hedging or even switching sides? So, if President Trump decides to strike, what's the most realistic expectation? According to reporting, Trump was told by military advisors that a kinetic strike will not lead to an immediate collapse of the Iranian regime.
So the president is sending military assets to the region, and all options remain on the table. But there's also this Wall Street Journal report that says President Trump was told an attack on Iran wouldn't guarantee the collapse of the regime. The reporting goes on to say the U.S. officials and Middle Eastern partners told the White House the regime was unlikely to fall after a massive bombing campaign, which could instead spark a broader conflict. Smaller assault packages, meanwhile, could boost morale among protesters, but ultimately not change the regime's crackdown.
Dr. Quanta Ahmed, a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, echoes that sentiment. Strikes may not collapse the regime overnight, but they can accelerate the regime's pathway toward eventual collapse, and she supports targeting regime assets without boots on the ground because that would be politically toxic in America.
Iran is extremely militarized. The regime is defended by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, who are loyalists, fanatics, and actually the prime beneficiaries of Iran's corrupt and excavated economy. It is imperative the United States stands with the Iranian people, and I do believe the president will make the decision to strike ballistic missile launchers, manufacturing capabilities, drone factories, a number of other assets to begin with, which can be readily targeted by the United States without ground troops or any kind of invasion, which would be unacceptable for the president and the American people. Regimes don't die overnight, but this is a dying regime. And if we fail to stand with the Iranian people who are being targeted by snipers, shot in the face and genitals, murdered in their cars, meanwhile, we have an unknown body count which exceeds 10,000, some say 12,000 already killed, then we will go down in history as not standing up for the dignity and nobility for almost 100 million Iranians who deserve better. Yeah. Iran has amazing naval assets which control the outflow of oil in the Persian Gulf, and that is extremely worrisome to our Gulf partners and the global energy markets. But we can also manage that. So this is the beginning of the end. An American strike is going to facilitate that, but it is not going to end it overnight.
Sure.
Retired four-star general Jack Keane agrees, but also points to a menu beyond just bombs. Cyber operations, communications disruption, and the role of kinetic strikes. While still warning the regime may not instantly fall, but could be pushed onto a collapse trajectory.
So what is likely taking place and what could take place? Well, first of all, we're trying to squeeze Iran in terms of its ability to sell more oil that it's been selling. That has taken place. That's not decisive in itself, but it's an enabler. We're likely helping the protesters communicate better, given the Iranians have shut down the internet. And that's a covert operation to do something like that. Cyber operations likely being conducted against Iranians' command and control systems, their telecommunications, their ability for the IRGC and the Bashi militia who are on the streets to communicate effectively. Also, cyber operations against their surveillance capability of the population itself. All of those are capabilities the United States has that are second to nobody's. Our offensive cyber capability is really something very special. And then we get to information operations. We are likely conducting information operations against the oppressors, the middle-level leaders of the oppressors, the people also carrying the guns. Because if and when, and I believe it's when, kinetic operations are conducted against that organization, against its leaders, we want divisiveness in it. We want that organization to break apart. We want some of them to go over to the side of the protesters, because the reality is the regime is more in trouble as a result of kinetic operations. And then the administration into kinetic operations itself, obviously leaders, obviously the organization is doing the suppressing. But you have to consider what else? Iran's ability to retaliate. Who would they retaliate against? U.S. bases and Israel. So, one, let's make certain that the defense of those systems are as good as they can be, and that has to be taken into consideration. And then what do we do about the target set in reducing Iran's capability to conduct those retaliation attacks? These are all things that are laid out to the president and making decisions and options. And obviously that means we would have to expand the target set to make certain we take down some of Iran's ballistic missiles, I assume. I don't know. I don't ask those kind of questions. But just looking at the portfolio and what needs to be done, you always have to consider what is the retaliation that Iran is going to do here. And let's get something straight. The objective of this attack has never been they're going to go to collapse this regime and we're going to get a regime change. I mean, that article, I totally disagree with it. The president has known that from the outset. At best, what would come of this is we put the Iran regime on a pathway to its collapse.
General Jack Keane's point is bigger than more options. It's about sequencing. The most effective pressure isn't always the loudest strike. It's the strategy that degrades capability, disrupts control, and raises the cost of repression without handing the regime an easy propaganda victory. That's why you see a mix of precision kinetic actions to remove key capabilities, paired with non-kinetic operations that fracture coordination, cyber pressure, communications disruption, and targeted measures that weaken the regime's grip without boots on the ground. And there's another lever people underestimate: the regime's money. If you squeeze the financial lifelines, banking access, key nodes, and the networks that move funds, you don't just hurt the economy, you strain the regime's ability to pay, procure, and police. And when a system can't reliably fund loyalty, its control starts to wobble.
There are economic and cyber options at the president's disposal, including accelerating the collapse of the banking system, Mike. That is keeping the regime and the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, and security forces funded right now. Mike.
At the end of the day, this isn't just a chess match between governments, it's a question of what kind of future wins. A freer Iran would mean millions of people no longer living under fear, censorship, and violence. But it's bigger than Iran. The world is dealing with a regime whose leaders have spent decades calling America the Great Satan, Israel the Little Satan, and whose officials have openly chanted death to America. And underneath the politics is ideology. In Twelver Shi'ism, the return of the hidden Imam, the 12th Imam, the Mahdi, is a major end-times expectation, and hardline currents have used modest language to frame conflict, destiny, and historic turning points. That's why the stakes are bigger than any single strike. Because if this regime ever gets to the point of a nuclear weapon, the risk doesn't stay regional, it becomes global. So yes, the headlines focus on strikes and strategy. But the real stakes are simpler: freedom versus fear, stability versus chaos, and whether the world stops a threat before it becomes irreversible. Thank you for tuning in to Chisom's Insight. Be sure to check out our other content and stay tuned for more. Peace!